folks, as always, I will give you the quick disclaimer. It is Friday. It is June 27th. And being Friday, it means we are recording in the actual morning. So we will be out there to help you get through your Friday. The we, of course, being myself, Jamie Steyer Johnson, alongside Brittany Carper here on the Her Hoop Stats podcast. And we have a relatively, I'll say, digestible slate of games to discuss from last night, but there is a lot to discuss from those two games for sure. Those games being the Washington Mystics defeating the Aces in Vegas 94-83, and then the Sparks beating the Indiana Fever in Indiana 85-75. And so obviously, a lot to get into from that. Some really just very, very fun games, both of them, as indicated by the final scores, very close throughout at time. Well, I'll say the Sparks and Fever were very close throughout.
Yes.
Mystics Aces, not as close as the score would actually indicate, which is unexpected, I'll say. But let's start with the Sparks and Fever. I was just saying before we started recording, I got up this morning, sat down, and had to watch back the fourth quarter because I just kept looking at the box score, at some of the statistics, and obviously I watched the game live, but I just kept coming back to, was it really 35-17 in the fourth quarter? Did the Sparks really bust off 35 points in 10 minutes? And I kept waiting for a huge run, like a 15-0 run, or like that 10-0 kill shot kind of run, right? And it just didn't really come. It was just so steady the entire fourth quarter. When you only miss 2 field goals, that certainly helps. And when you're getting a whole lot of second chance opportunities, it really wasn't the free throws contributed, but not in an uneven manner from the things that the Fever got. I mean, the teams both ended up with 28 free throws apiece. And so I was very impressed watching it back, just at the resiliency, at the steadiness, at, I mean, what they got from individual, like Azari Stevens had an unreal fourth quarter. De'Arica Hamby had incredible plays. But man, that fourth quarter was crazy to watch live and almost crazier to watch back because just an absolute offensive explosion from the Sparks.
Yeah, I love your word steady. I think that was kind of the key to the game, and really that started with Plum. I thought she was so patient throughout the whole game, really picked and, chose her spots to take advantage of them. And then, like you said, in the fourth quarter, Stevens and Hamby had some really great plays. Stevens alone, I think, had a little stretch there. 3 and 1, they got a missed free throw and 1. It was like they just kept coming at you steadily. And it wasn't, like you said, some massive offensive explosion. It was just really consistent play around the rim. And only missing 2 shots helps that, certainly. But I just thought I thought Plum throughout the game was just so good at picking her poison. She wasn't trying to force shots. She was taking what the defense gave her. And, they just really capitalized with their size. And that's what they can certainly do when you have Rickea Jackson, a big wing like that. And then you have Hamby and Stevens. And so I just thought for them, for the Sparks, just a really gritty, gutty, steady win on the road to really persevere in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, and that's a great point on Kelsey Plum. I thought that she really showed her veteran leadership, especially you look back at the beginning of the game, and Indiana was very obviously trying to prevent her from personally getting going as far as scoring goes. And so she said, okay, that's fine. I like to pass the ball. I'm used to passing the ball, and made really great decisions. Only took 1 shot in the entire first quarter, which was a made 3. And then she had 3 assists, just had a single turnover. And so I felt like that really set the tone for her and for the team as a whole, where she said, yeah, we're gonna get everyone involved. Everyone's gonna cook tonight. And so you have Rickea Jackson with a really big first quarter. And then, as we said, you had Azari Stevens with a monstrous fourth. And then you had a couple other quarters in there, obviously 2 and 3, where you had sort of death by a thousand cuts where you didn't have any one individual completely taking over, and no one had like the game of their life like we've seen happen sometimes in this season for the Sparks. They've had some really tremendous individual performances, and nothing really jumps off the page. Like the biggest would be Azure Stevens' total stat line being 9 for 12 from the floor, having those 7 rebounds. But I think that that is something she's already done this season, and it's more just that a lot of people played to their ability. When you have 4 double-digit scorers, when you have 2 20-point scorers, and you are able to do that, and mostly doing it in the half court too, which is really the crazy part. When
Mhm.
in the fourth quarter, again, I keep coming back to 35 points in the fourth quarter, and this is a team that got 4 fast break points. Like, that is wild. That is like unimaginable to me. And 11 of those points in the fourth were from the free throw line. So that's still 24 points coming almost completely in the half court. A lot of that being second chance. And even so, Indiana still beat them on second chance points as well, where LA really dominated was points in the paint, 42-28. And I was extremely impressed. I felt like everyone that stepped out on the court contributed in a big way. Even you have Mercedes Russell played 11 minutes without scoring, but she had a pair of really big offensive rebounds. She had some really big assists, or excuse me, some really big steals, a block, and just came through and was able to defend. That's not going to show up in the stat sheet very much, but
Yep.
she defended extremely well. And so it's hard because LA has had a lot of ups and downs. They're still figuring some things out. You have Odyssey Sims starting out really strong and then has been away from the team for personal reasons. You still don't have Cameron Brink back. You lost Ray Burrell almost immediately. And yet they keep working. And I think that this is a very positive indication for them. Obviously, the Fever are not at full strength, but as I said, neither are the Sparks. And so if you're going to keep competing, half the battle is believing and continuing to play, and they're certainly doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on it with Russell, but really the team as a whole defensively, I thought their size really bothered the Fever. I think they held them to 36.5% from the field. They were, let me see, 25% from the 3 point line. And so they were just able to take advantage. And I thought just really affect shots at the rim, which when you have the size like the Sparks do, you can run them off the 3 point line, put a little bit more pressure on the guards, force them in size where you then, inside where you have somebody to defend the rim like they do. And it's not just one person that's there. Stevens, Jackson, Russell, Hamby, they all have the ability to affect shots when teams are driving at them. And so that was, I thought, the big positive that they could kind of take away from that is just, yeah, obviously the Fever are shorthanded. They play completely different without Clark. I mean, it's very evident. I think they score 12 less points a game without her, just in terms of the pace. And it's not necessarily just her shot making that the Fever miss. It's her ability to push the ball and
Mhm.
find open people, create stuff off the pick and roll. And so for them, I think the Fever, you saw that last night, they're just missing some of those easy scoring chances that they lose. But again, credit to the Sparks defense because I thought they were kind of all over the place. They had an opportunity, they could have folded. I think they got down 10 on the road and they
In the
just
fourth
stuck.
quarter.
Yeah, yeah, and that was how the fourth quarter started. And so, their second quarter was extremely ugly. I think they went almost 10 minutes of game time without a field goal from the first quarter to the second quarter. But like you said, it was just that steadiness, and I thought it was just they were chipping away. They never let it get out of control, and so credit to where they're continuing to still go. I think that team still has a lot of promise,
Mhm.
and we saw that last night certainly. And so I think if they can continue on, that trajectory, certainly a team that can make some noise here.
And let's touch on the Fever here for a minute because, again, they are very different without Caitlin on the floor, but that is not the entirety of the issues they're facing. They're going to be without Demir Stantis for a while, as she is with Brazil at the AmeriCup, and that's someone who had a little bit of a tough start to the year and was just starting to find her footing. Like, we've seen, she's had some tremendous seasons. Primarily up in Minnesota when she was playing with the Lynx. She had some really, really great years there. She's someone who has the height to be able to defend on the interior, but can stretch out to the perimeter. Just as, again, I'll keep using the word steady. Like, that is a steadying force for Indiana. She has that experience, and she's not going to be, demanding a bunch of shots. She's there for whatever they need her. And now she's out for a while. You have Duana Bonner out. And so you are really, really thin on the interior. You've got your starters in Natasha Howard and Aaliyah Boston. And then you go down the roster, and your next interior players are ones that have seen almost no time this year. You've got Bree Turner, who's 6'3", who's a forward center, but she, again, hasn't really played a whole lot this year. And then you have Michaela Timpson, who's a rookie, who I think is more of a developmental piece. And so, as you mentioned, a lot of LA's advantage was on the interior, where they do have that tremendous amount of size, that strength. They have Dearica Hamby and Azurá Stevens, who, Azurá having obviously like the best season of her career. And then you have Mercedes Russell coming in off the bench, who at the very least is a tremendous amount of size, and she's going to threaten in that way. And so I do think that Indiana is going to have to make some tough decisions, have some tough conversations, because when you lose Duana Bonner, when you waive Duana Bonner and you bring in Aerie McDonald, I'm not at all saying that is the wrong move. Aerie was great in the time that she was in Indiana on her hardship contract, but that is not filling the same gap that Duana Bonner creates. So I think that there is going to have to be some consideration for making a move on either Bree Turner or Michaela Timpson, because you just need someone who's going to be able to contribute now, especially if Caitlin misses any extended time. You can't be missing your primary playmaker and be having these interior issues.
Absolutely. And you said it. We're not front office people. We're not trying to do jobs, but certainly McDonald filled a hole for them. When you waive a player like Duana Bonner, and that's who you fill it with, and then you haven't really seen a lot from what your bench provides in Turner and Timpson, the questions remain: who's out there that you're maybe going to plug in? Because they absolutely, if they want to be the team that, I think the core of them believe they are, they have to find a player that can fill that hole for them there, because Howard and Boston aren't really stretching the floor for them. They're not known to do that. And so I think they have to find a big that can stretch it, that can shoot it like Dantas, because that's when they're successful. And I think that's, going to help the bench, because right now when Turner, I think, played 4 minutes last night, had 1 rebound and 3 fouls. And, that's just not going to cut it. And then, like you said, Timpson just hasn't had the minutes to really see, what she's capable of, but she's a rookie, and that position is hard. And so she is more of probably a developmental piece for them. So why I understand the signing of McDonald, and maybe there's more they know about Clark, going forward that we don't, certainly in the interim. But I think they have to, like you said, have some hard decisions coming forward, because they need to fill that bench spot with somebody that can contribute a significant amount, I think, and be an impact player for them.
Especially with the fact that, Aaliyah Boston played the most of anyone last night, just behind Lexi Hull. So Lexi Hull played 33 minutes, 29 seconds. Aaliyah Boston was out there for 33 minutes and 15 seconds. And Aaliyah is capable of playing those minutes. She is not at her best when she has to play that many minutes, as almost no center is, because of the physicality, because of the competitiveness of the WNBA. And I think that we also saw that kind of come through in her night, going up against, first of all, again, very stout defense, a lot of length. And so that's going to affect your efficiency. But 4 of 13 from the floor, I think a lot of that also has to do with having some level of fatigue. And for an Indiana team that is at its best when they are playing fast, when they are getting up and down the court, you can't afford that where either you're playing without a center or you're playing with a significantly less efficient center because you're kind of running her into the ground. And that's not even getting into the fact that, as we know, when you play more minutes than is perhaps ideal and don't have a whole lot as far as backups go, that's where injuries start compounding. And so I'm kind of taking a couple leaps on this, but it's based on precedent. It's based on things we've seen with other teams. And so that's something that I really think Indiana has to be looking at in a serious manner, because it's simply not going to be sustainable. And especially when you are in a stretch of your season where you're kind of muddling around the middle, below the middle at the moment.
Mhm.
And who knows how long Caitlin's going to be out. She could be back soon. She could not be. I think that, if anything, what just happened in the NBA finals in their brother team is
Yes.
probably a little bit of a reminder to not push things if you're not ready to be out there on the floor.
Mhm.
Um, and so then you have a stretch where last night, tough fought loss at home, and then you play a back to back, and they're going to Dallas tonight, which is quite the scheduling quirk, I'll say.
Yes.
Um, Side note, NCAA expanding by one game per season doesn't seem like a lot, but when you put that on top of the WNBA expanding their regular season schedule every year without actually expanding the time frame, that's got to be a major priority in CBA negotiations. They have to expand the season because this ain't going to cut it. But I'm very intrigued to see how things go tonight against a Wings team that also is a little bit thin in the interior without Gaza Suter and Tierra McCowan, but Leroux has really been doing some things well. So I think it's going to be tough for Indiana with the back to back and with the travel today.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. Like you said, Dallas isn't strong in the interior, but Rue has given them a big boost. They're playing, I think, better. They're kind of getting their footing a little bit. And that's a tough ask on a back to back, especially with limited, backups in that forward position. And so with Boston, I think she's, like you said, really good when she gets her rest. And so it's going to be interesting to see what they kind of do tonight. But also, if Indiana is going to choose to play a little bit smaller, you have to shoot better than 25%
Mhm.
from the 3 point line. So I think that's going to be really interesting too. Is okay, if you're going to choose to keep doing that, you're going to have more shot makers. And
Mhm.
so that has to play itself out too. But I certainly think tonight's matchup will be interesting if Clark is out again. I don't know that they said she was day to day, so
Mhm.
I think we'll see how that goes. But like you said, you're in a position where you don't necessarily want to push injuries at this point, and so I would imagine she probably sits. But if she does play, certainly you'll see a different fever team out there.
Absolutely. And the last point I'll make on tonight's matchup of Wings Fever, very interested. I think that Maisha Hines Allen and Alyssa Smith are going to have the potential to have really big games because, as we said, the interior, a little bit of a struggle spot right now for both teams. But I think that the ability, the strength that Hines Allen and Smith have, that's a little bit more depth at like the 4 spot than Indiana has. And so they haven't had like major breakout games, but they both have a lot of capability. So I think that that's something to definitely keep an eye on there for the Wings, alongside obviously Arike getting going, Paige really finding her footing. Like, that's going to get a lot of attention. And so you kind of look down the list that, okay, who's going to be next up? And I really think there's a lot of potential for it to be one of those two or both of those players. So looking over to the other matchup last night, a team that I talk about a lot, and I see a lot of other WNBA fans kind of lamenting the lack of discussion on this team, which continues to blow my mind. It's the Washington Mystics, and the Mystics on a little bit of a tear. Take down the Lynx, go to Vegas, take down Vegas. That is in itself extremely impressive. I put out a little bit of a maybe strong take last night, and that was very simply Mystics are going to be in the finals in the next 2 years. And look, I'm the first one to say, like, I'll throw out a take and feel free to cold takes exposed me. That's fine. I don't stake my entire self-worth on that being right, but I do feel very strongly that this is by far the best setup franchise for the future, because what they have right now is looking really good. And that game was dominant. The final margin is 11 points. It was not even close to that close during most of the game. And this is a team that was without their veteran leader, their leading scorer in Brittany Sykes. And then a minute into the game, her replacement in the starting lineup, Jade Melbourne, gets a tooth knocked out.
Knocked out. Yep.
Is not able to re-enter for her free throws, and so is not allowed to come back into the game. I don't know that I personally would be going back into the game if I lost a tooth anyway, but you are without 2 point guards. So you have Shook Sutton can run the point, played all 40 minutes, and then you had Lucy Olson that played almost the entire game after Jade went out with 37 and a half minutes and just dominated this Aces team. I'm going to let you talk because otherwise I'll talk for the next 40 minutes about it. But I was blown away by another just incredible Mystics performance. They just keep finding different ways to do it.
They do, and it's a really big credit to their rookie class. I mean, they played 77 minutes last night, scored 52 points. And we're usually talking about Kiki and Sonia Citron, but last night, Lucy Olson, like you said, comes into the game 2 minutes in, plays 38 minutes, 5 of 12 from the floor, 3 of 7 from the 3 point line, just active everywhere. And just talk about a player staying ready. She's had games where she doesn't play, coach's decision. She's had games where she's, in that 10, 15-minute mark off the bench, but to come in and play 38 minutes against the Aces on the road and just really, really show what you can do was, hats off to her, that team. Their core is just, we're not even mentioning Shakira Austin. They just have so many pieces that are playing well together, and I know Aaliyah Edwards has been in a tough spot, but if you saw that last night when she got that steal layup and she runs off, they call a timeout. They're hugging Sydney Johnson. Just the vibe they give off is just so incredible. But again, we touch on this a lot, and it's just about how much this rookie class and really a credit to where the college game has gone that has prepared players to be ready when they are making their mark in the W. And I think this class more than ever has shown that no matter where they played at, they are ready. And so it's a testament to how far the game has come, because I think there has been years past where it is a little bit slower, but when you're looking at this Mystics team, 3 of those players, were just from the college game and have made their mark, and definitely something to build around for the future. And so your take, I don't know, if that will come true, but when you look at their core and, the pieces they could add, and I think when you watch them play, they all play so hard. If you're looking at places to go, that's a franchise. Okay, I can see myself wanting to play there. And so again, when you have a core like they do with Austin, Urief, and Citron, Olsen, you instantly think, okay, we can go there, we can compete. And so that's not a far off take, I don't think, to think that they could be in that position in the next 2 years.
And part of it is that there's so few teams that have a significant portion of their core secured going forward. And I've been a little bit surprised, honestly, by the sort of lack of prioritization of securing those younger pieces for a lot of teams because of the fact that almost every veteran is going to be a free agent after this season. But I think that that gives Washington a massive opportunity, and not just to say, okay, yes, we have a fun team, we are coming together like that. As you say, the interaction between Aaliyah Edwards coming off the court to Coach City Johnson, like obviously his team loves playing for him, and that is so important. I think that the environment there just seems very supportive, very welcoming. I think that there were plenty of opportunities early in the season for people to get down on themselves, get down on each other, to be discouraged when you struggle a little bit. And this is also a team that had a record long losing streak to start the season last year. And so this is a program that's had some struggles, but they just said, we just want to win for each other. We just keep playing, we keep showing up, and obviously when you are relying that heavily upon your youth, you have to learn by experience. I talk about this a lot in the college game. You cannot expect perfection from people who have not been in that position before. And you cannot simulate experience. Like, you have to gain it live, you have to gain it in games. And so for Sydney Johnson to allow some of these younger pieces to figure stuff out on the fly, to play through mistakes, and to still be supportive, to still be, holding them to a high standard, but also not holding them to an unrealistic standard, and understanding that these players a lot of the time know when they've done something wrong. You're not pulling them immediately because guess what? You got to figure it out. That's what they were saying on the broadcast last night when Sonia Citron got drafted. First thing they said to her was, "You're not a rookie. You are a player on this team. Like, we need you." And she stepped up. And a lot of that
Yeah.
comes from the belief that they believe that she can step up. And so she says, "Oh, all right. Well, you need me. You think that I'm capable of this. So I am, and I'm going to do
Hmm.
it."
Absolutely. I think I just love watching her game. Just so calm, so steady. Nothing bothers her. Plays with the same demeanor. And I think a big thing, like you're saying, when they said you're not a rookie down that stretch, when I think the Aces had cut it to 9 or 7, they're looking to get her a shot.
Yeah.
And so that speaks volumes of what they, think the type of player that she is and the impact that she has. And she's willing to step up in those moments too. She's not shy about it, between her and Urief. And I think again, they both have opportunities. They play a two-man game so well together, and they're just set up so well for the future, like you said. And like other teams have not necessarily prioritized that. And I think last night, if you're the Aces, I think a big piece that they wish they would have kept was Kate Martin, because I think she could have really provided a lot of spark in her second year off the bench for this team that desperately needs something to give them a boost. And so her play the other night, I think again, she's had a little up and down with the Valkyries, but again, not maybe identifying the right pieces in the draft, or not, prioritizing them, I think has been a really big miss for the Aces over the last couple of years. On the flip side of how well we've seen Washington draft and then prioritize that.
Yeah, and I actually just did Locked On WBB with Chelsea Late the other day, and we talked a lot about the Aces and kind of what's happening over there. And they are essentially the polar opposite of Washington because they have the fewest assets secured going forward after this season. And I haven't done the math, but I feel pretty confident in saying not just the fewest assets, but also the lowest production from those assets, because the only players that they have secured for next year, if they want them, are Aaliyah Nye and Elizabeth Kitley on their rookie scale contracts. And then they have the option for Kirsten Bell, which I don't think they'll probably pick up. And so you don't have a whole lot coming from those players. And so if things continue to spiral for the Aces, you end up in a very difficult spot as far as trying to sell people on what you're going to do going forward. It means that it's easier to do a full reset. But that's a pretty minor upside when you have gone from kind of the highest of highs to not quite the lowest of lows, but getting there. I think that my struggle and a lot of people's struggle is you keep looking at the Aces through this lens of there's a lot of the same pieces that have been there from their championship run.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep thinking, well, they have to figure it out because they have these great pieces. And the fact of the matter is, like, it's just not there. It's just not right. Like, to win this year, I think that they're in a similar spot as Indiana, where there has to be some difficult conversations
Absolutely.
because the pieces, the system they have going right now is simply not working. And it's not just, oh, are we competing for a championship? It's, are we making the playoffs? And that is a legitimate question right now. And so I don't know what the answer is because there's not a simple one. But if you're not making pretty major moves, which we know is not really typical in the W in season, but if you're not making some pretty big moves here, I think that it's essentially going to look like the second half last night, where at one point Becky Hammon went ahead and sat all 5 of the starters. That's kind of what the season's going to feel like, because if you don't make a move right now, you're basically saying, well, I guess this is what it is.
Yeah, and so it will be interesting to see, but like last night, Jackie Young had 13 in the first quarter, and then she didn't score again. And I was curious. I went and looked this morning, and they are 11th in the league in field goal percentage, and they're 12th out of 13 in 2-point percentage. And what they struggle in is transition defense. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you are missing shots at that volume, and then you're constantly, now I know last night they ended up 50% from the field, but the problem is when you're a team that isn't great playing in transition and you're 11th or 12th in the league, that's hard. And when you saw Washington make their big run, the Aces missed shots. Washington was pushing the ball. They were getting open threes. They were getting layups at the rim. And then the next thing you know, you're down 22 points.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for a disastrous, stretch of basketball. And so, but it's not just one game that this has happened to the Aces this year. This is a constant thing that we've seen. And so, like you said, you're looking at the same pieces. You're wondering why there isn't a different result. And we don't know the answer to that, but they're not shooting great. And I think, again, when then you have somewhat of an older team and then you're struggling, you're out in transition like that, and then you don't have pieces off the bench that are making an impact, you're turning your head every which way, but there aren't any answers because we're seeing the same thing. And so, like you said, if there aren't moves made, which I don't know if we're going to start seeing more trades and transactions happening in the WNBA as the game continues to grow and evolve like you do in the NBA. Certainly, I think that's something that maybe I would like to see more of, that teams are willing to take more risks
Especially
and
this year. There's so
yeah,
few like long-term consequences.
absolutely. Like, if you're trading for one or two pieces that you think is going to be the push to get you to the playoffs or a contending team, certainly this is a year to do that when you're not tied in long term to any one player. And so I think that the Aces are going to have a couple hard decisions here in the next week or two, probably, if things don't really, because I think they also play 10 of their next 12 games on the road.
Yeah.
And when you're, doing that, that's a big ask. And so I think, again, we're going to have to see a lot of answers here instead of more questions out of the Aces.
Yep. because I mean, we're very much looking at a situation right now where it's extremely realistic that we're talking about one of, if not, I mean, potentially even both of the Fever and the Aces missing the playoffs. And that's obviously a little bit down the road, but the way that they've been playing, the questions there are about the roster and, with people missing games, it's it's
It's
very
yeah,
very
it's certainly
possible.
possible because you've seen some other surprising teams, and,
Mhm.
I also think there's some teams maybe right below them that are gonna continue to get better,
Yep.
and they have the pieces in place, it just took them a little bit of time, and so it was like the Fever last year, they started out super slow, then they had that push, and I think there are definitely a couple teams that can do the same thing, and so those 2 teams are really in an interesting position here to kinda see what's next or what moves they make to really bolster what happens for the, second half of this.
Absolutely, because yeah, we are rapidly approaching the midway point of the season. About 14, 15 games in for most of the league in a 44 game season. So very intriguing. A couple of really interesting matchups from last night, and yeah, just very much looking forward to seeing what else we are getting out of the Fever tonight. The Aces over the weekend. So like you said, got to start getting some answers instead of more questions. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for joining me as always on Friday mornings. Folks, you can find Brittany online at Brittany Carper on pretty much all your platforms. You can find me at JSteyz, JSTEYZ. And then make sure you're following along with Her Hoop Stats at Her Hoop Stats. Any social media that you're on, make sure you're liking and subscribed to the Her Hoop Stats podcast coming at you daily during the week, and subscribe to our newsletter for all of our other written information coming out from our awesome team over there. Got a really big weekend ahead of us here. Make sure that you're tuning into the W. Also got the AmeriCup starting. That'll be really fun. Quite a few W players going to be over there, as well as some of the stars of the college game from America. That's going to be a blast to watch. And we will be back here talking about that, talking about the W, talking about whatever it is we get talking about next week on the Her Hoop Stats podcast. Thanks so much for listening.